If you had to end a hike short of your original plan, would you think you failed? Well, I'd like to get you out of that mindset. Even with the plan, we older hikers need to look at things differently. My problem is that after years as a high school and college athlete and a career with constant deadlines and goals, that I'm used to seeing what I didn't get done as failure. Looking back, in about 1 out of every 4 or 5 of my hikes, I had to stop earlier than I planned. I made decisions that respected real limitations to what could be done. Now, that changes from hike to hike and depends on challenges from each one. Many times it was injuries that forced me off the trail. Sometimes it was other things outside my control. I once ran into a hiker on the AT in Pennsylvania, and he was distraught that he had to get off the trail sometime in the near future. He had run out of money to continue on and was undernourished from the hike. Now, he had intended to hike the full trail, all 2,200 miles, and was stopping around mile 1,100, about halfway. I was hiking only 570 miles, and he thought I was a success. Well, he was a failure. But go back to one of the first videos on this channel when I said success on the trail isn't about how far you went, it's about how much you enjoyed the experience. That allows making reasonable choices. Today I'm going to talk about 4 times I stopped a hike early and the reasons why. Not for the sake of telling stories, but for what we can learn. Thinking in terms of success and failure based on miles covered is the wrong approach. Now, it's okay to have goals. One of my lifelong goals was to complete section hiking the entire Appalachian Trail. I planned to complete that in 2022. It took me until 2024. Now, did I fail because it took me 20 years rather than 18? Well, as it turns out, I had a more enjoyable experience by adjusting when I needed to. Now, reasons for stopping a hike early fall into these categories. First, there's injury or illness. There's underestimating the challenge. There's a change in the environment. And then there's external factors. Now, we should avoid getting hung up on stopping early. All I mean is that when I was hiking from point A to B, point B changed along the way. Now, I'm saying this to assure hikers over 50 that it's okay when plans change. That shouldn't stop you from enjoying the miles. Injury and illnesses can affect hikers at any age. The challenge is deciding when an injury is severe enough to get us off the trail. What a 20-something can tolerate, a 50-plus hiker might not. For this case, I'm using my 2022 Appalachian Trail hike. My plan was to hike from Roanoke, Virginia, south to Springer Mountain in Georgia, then go up to Maine, hike the 100-mile wilderness, and climb Mount Katahdin. Way cool, hitting each terminus just a couple weeks apart. A great way to complete the trail. Oh, fall on loose rocks and a dislocated shoulder ended that hope. On the way into town, after climbing down off a bridge to fill up on water at a stream, I realized when trying to get back up that there was no way I could safely hike in that condition. One hiker told me there were no serious climbs or rock scrambles south of there. Yeah, 500 miles of AT was just smooth sailing according to his 20-something brain. Yeah, not likely. If ever the saying, the trail will be there next year, had any meaning, that was it. I ended the hike in Damascus, Virginia. In retrospect, the miles I did finish covered one of the most enjoyable sections of trail I've been on. Ponies on Grayson Highland, a brief bear encounter, plenty of nice hostels along the way. Yeah, one of them fed me tree bark and grass, but it was still a nice place, even if it was vegan. I can mope about the miles not covered or enjoy the memories. Now, I've been injured on other hikes, but I chose this one because different things went into deciding. Having to assess my condition against a counter-argument by a much younger hiker, the distance I'd have to travel again to pick up the hike later. But for a 64-year-old hiker with an injury that requires being in a sling for a month for proper healing, the choice was easy. Not only was it unsafe to hike with a bad dominant arm because of more potential falls, I could make the injury itself substantially worse. An obvious choice from the outside, not as easy to make in the moment. The year after that hike, I decided that 2023 was the year to finish the AT. I took the midnight train to Georgia from Springfield, Massachusetts to Gainesville to start northward back to Damascus. That's about 480 miles, and my plan was to complete what I meant to the year before. Now, after getting to Damascus, I'd go up to Munson, Maine to hike the 100-mile wilderness and climb Mount Katahdin. Now, the southernmost quarter of the AT is not the hardest part of the trail, though it's not easy either. It wasn't my longest hike, but the combination of the miles and the difficulty made it my hardest hike up until then. So yes, I completed that section, but on the train ride home, I realized something very important. If I went up to Maine, I'd be hiking to finish, not to enjoy. My childhood dream has been to hike the 100-mile wilderness someday. I thought about it constantly in my teens ever since I first saw that stretch on a road map. It's 99.7 miles from Monson to Abol Bridge. There's plenty of dirt roads crisscrossing the area, and there's a lot of people enjoying the wilderness who are not hiking the AT. The wilderness part means no resupply points through that stretch, not so remote that you can't get out if you really need to. One dirt road becomes paved just a few miles off the trail. Still, you can get lost there, literally and figuratively. You really feel secluded from the rest of society. I was pretty tired from the hike down south, which was harder than I expected. It was an easy call. Instead of 2 related hikes that year, I postponed the second one. By the way, the next year when I did complete the AT on fresh legs, I ran into one thru hiker who was incredibly unhappy with that part of his hike. He said if I wasn't so close to finishing, I'd chuck the whole thing now, and I think he used stronger language. That's not how I'd want to finish my decades-long hike of the trail. I believe he was dealing with norovirus, and I felt bad that I had no Imodium in my first aid kit. Now, this is the incident that made me add that to the first aid kit. This funny thing, he was sick, and I felt guilty about it. After I hiked hundreds of miles each year with more than a month away each time, I decided this year to do shorter hikes closer to home. One of those hikes is about 40 miles on an out and back, 2 nights on the Wantastiquet Monadnock Trail. Say that 5 times fast. Now this summer the weather's been really inconsistent. Every day either very hot and humid or there was torrential rain. Now finally there's a break in the rain and I had a window to go. So on a 50-mile drive to the trailhead, my wife checked the latest forecast at the Interstate Rest Stop in Vermont. The report had changed. The next day would be clear, but 100 degrees Fahrenheit and humid. I told her this doesn't sound like a good idea. Hyperthermia is real. 100 degrees, about 38 Celsius, and humid is an invitation to disaster, especially with me not knowing which water sources I could depend on. On a long hike, you know you have to deal with adverse weather, rain, heat, drought, but to start a 3-day hike knowing you're walking into a sauna likely to last the whole hike, that's insane. The story has a nice ending, though. My wife and I went to a nearby town, did some shopping, had a nice breakfast together. Quality time with my wife, always a bonus. For external factors, this one is pretty uninteresting, but I mention it because it does happen. For example, suppose you're out hiking and your wedding is approaching. Your future spouse might expect you to be there. In my case, it was something more mundane. I was hiking the long trail from the Canadian-U.S. border southward with a friend. He had already got off the trail early due to an injury. I continued on for 50 more miles, but I got a text from my wife. We were house hunting at the time, and she found something promising. I know, not a particularly interesting reason to end a hike early, but given my friend was already off the trail, it made sense to stop. Sometimes, real life intervenes. So what are the lessons here? Well, short of a life-altering injury, none of these reasons prevent you from going out again later. Injury and illness can be recovered from. Changes in the environment are just bad timing. You still learn from underestimating a challenge, and experience guides your future attempts. You can get better conditioned. Now I'm able to hike farther and longer at 68 than I could in my 50s when I was a desk jockey. With every hike, have a plan B. Know what conditions or events are enough to force you off the trail. Plan bailout routes. On the Appalachian Trail, even in a 100-mile wilderness, it's pretty easy. There are plenty of exit points. But there are parts of other trails, like the John Muir Trail, where getting off is sometimes harder than continuing on. Now, I'm planning a Grand Canyon hike next year, through the South Kaibab National Forests on the Arizona Trail, then into the canyon at Grandview Point, along the plateau on the Tonto Trail, then down to Bright Angel Campground. But here's the thing. We have a plan B and a plan C. If temperatures are going to drop below freezing on the rim, plan B is to skip the national forest, maybe do some sightseeing in the area for a day, and then enter the canyon at our permitted time. If we get information that there's no water flowing at Cottonwood Creek, Grapevine, or Lone Tree campsites, there's a plan C. Going over the plateau for 3 days without water is one of those dangerous environmental conditions. Plan C is to skip the plateau part and just hike the Bright Angel Campground by the South Kaibab Trail at our permitted time, then hike out the next day. Disappointingly short, but we'd still enjoy the canyon with the distinct advantage of not dying along the way. And we can still hike in the national forest before then if the conditions permit. Hikes, whether for a day or a month, aren't races. Success is found not only at the original finish line. Keep enjoying the miles no matter what your age. Use the wisdom of your age to keep yourself safe. When we were hiking the John Muir Trail, I told Dave, if the weather's not right, I have no problem skipping the last 2 miles to the peak of Mount Whitney. and just hiking over trail crest down to the camp below. He's been up there before, so it wouldn't ruin the hike for him. Now, it didn't come to that. We did make it to the peak, but being willing to pass it by when conditions called for it was the right choice. I hope that faced with the need, we can all make the safe decision. If you appreciate this content, please like, share, subscribe, and comment on this or other topics you'd like me to cover. And if you haven't seen this video, please take a look at it now. Thanks for watching.